hair's going back up because I can't focus with it down. I want to make it clear here that I'm not a trained economist. I'm making everything up. I have read a little bit, but this stuff really does just come from my brain. It doesn't come from a book or a website or anything. Why do I think it's important to talk about how to fix the economy? Well, frankly, I don't see enough people talking about what we're supposed to do. By we, I mean the United States as a country. I see a lot of factionalism. There's a lot of people who would rather say, like, I'm a communist, I'm a socialist, I'm a leftist, capitalist, libertarian, democratic socialist. They would rather just have a team. They'd rather be put at odds with each other and like treat them like they're entirely ideologically distinct. In theory, those things may be ideologically distinct. In practice, they don't really have to be contradictory. If we want our society and our economy to get any better, we can't just evaluate ideas based on where they are in our perceived landscape of ideology. We actually have to look at the merit of ideas and apply them hypothetically. Ask if the idea could make the world a better place. I already said in part 1 that I'm not here to reinforce your worldview, but it needs to be said again here. Your decision to agree or disagree with me is your own decision, not the decision of the political party that you want to be a part of. Also, yes, this is the second part in a 2-part series. If you haven't seen the first one, I recommend you check it out, called What's Wrong with the Economy. It would be a valuable resource for you. It might be entertaining. If you find this entertaining, you'd find the previous one entertaining, so I just recommend watching it just for fun and for my channel stats. So your elected representatives are making up everything as well. That's the other thing. Like, yeah, I'm making things up, but so is every member of Congress. They just make shit up. A democracy selects for politicians who are good at winning elections, not politicians who know the best course of action. So we are all just making shit up. I'm going to start this video off with a call to action. I think that you, yes, you watching this video, should run for public office. Find an opening and run for public office, because having the right ideas is a lot harder than winning elections. The only way anything gets done is if we have people who want to get it done with the power to get it done. That means winning elections, and it means having a plan. I'm making this video because I really do not see enough of just brainstorming policy online. I see a lot about how communism or socialism is going to solve all of our problems, but we live in a democracy, and that means distilling multiple ideas into one good piece of legislation on the floor of Congress. Before that happens, you need lots of good ideas. So this video is my contribution to the pool of good ideas for how to fix the economy. In part 1, we talked about balancing the budget, which would require changes to taxation and spending. I estimated that we could have a theoretical like 1.82 trillion in surplus. We also talked about an important economic concept called the multiplicative effect, which I will not be re-explaining. Basically, due to the multiplicative effect, the main goal of government spending is to increase cash flow circulation, which is how I've defined growth in that last video. I mentioned that I had a healthcare plan that was going to save at least $500 billion from the Medicare budget. And well, yeah, I mean, that's an estimate. I wouldn't know until the plan is put into effect, but well, I guess I'll explain to you guys the plan. The issue that healthcare is far too expensive even with insurance. The solution, an American Insurance Bureau, a national healthcare solution. All that would need to happen is the president needs to create a bureau of insurance, call it the American Insurance Bureau, and Congress would have to sign the bill repealing Medicare and replacing it with the American Insurance Bureau. When I talk about repealing and replacing Medicare, what I'm especially talking about is replacing Medicare Advantage, which is the part of Medicare that subsidizes private insurance and accounts for over 50% of the overall Medicare spending. I'm talking about replacing that with a simple, comprehensive plan. And yes, this is for senior citizens. In addition to replacing the health insurance plans provided to senior citizens under Medicare, I'm also suggesting that we get rid of the employer mandate, which is in the Affordable Care Act. In the absence of the employer mandate, we provide an affordable option to anyone. I'm just talking about providing insurance to everyone through the American Insurance Bureau. So yeah, from kff.org, Medicare payments to Medicare Advantage plans for benefits covered under Parts A and B tripled between 2014 and 2024 from $159 billion to $505 billion. That number is expected to rise to $1.3 trillion by 2034. Payments to Medicare Advantage plans are estimated to be 120% of what Medicare would have spent on the same beneficiary on average. So that means that the parts of Medicare that are supplementing private health insurance are being abused by the private health insurance companies, and we're being overcharged. Medicare Advantage is taxpayer funded, and so this is simply a waste of taxpayer dollars. My suggestion to replace this complicated system with a simple insurance plan would mean that everybody could benefit from the United States healthcare spending, except for the private insurance companies who would be forced to compete with the United States. I'm not going to provide a full dissection of the current healthcare system and exactly how each component of it should be replaced. So all we're talking about here is a low deductible, low premium healthcare plan with high coverage. It's not reinventing the wheel here. It just, you can just get insurance. It seems like the simplest solution, but it's also the easiest solution to integrate in America because we already have our private insurance system. All we would need is a public insurance option, and we would just already have a fully integrated option. The way that Medicare works is it subsidizes private insurance. It also forces your employer to pay for your insurance, which is kind of silly because it makes it harder for you to switch jobs. You have to switch insurance when you switch jobs, and there can be lapses of coverage between jobs, which is ridiculous and unacceptable. But also it costs your employer money, which is kind of silly for like a long-term solution in a free country. Your employer has to pay for you. But also subsidizing private insurance just leads to us paying the salary of the private insurance CEOs, whereas if we run our own insurance bureau, we can use the money more effectively for the public good, directly actually paying for healthcare. So instead of subsidizing private insurance, we just run public insurance better than the private insurance people can do it. I'm not talking about nationalizing private insurance. I'm not talking about getting rid of those companies. I am talking about competing with them. So it's a new affordable option that isn't employer funded. So you can change jobs all you want. Both employers and workers save money, which is good for growth, currency circulation. More money in your pocket means more money circulating, which is deflationary and good for the economy. Of course, there is a unique advantage to the public insurance option, which is that the insurance fund would come from congressional spending as well as from deductible payments, which means that the fund would be solvent and could grow over time. Of course, the insurance bureau would be able to invest parts of the fund into the economy, which is, if you've ever heard of a sovereign wealth fund, it's exactly that, which means that over a few years of Congress making donations and people making deductible payments with the right investment, the fund could grow on its own. We could reduce deductible payments, eliminate premiums, or reduce congressional spending, or all three. Actually grows over time, where in the beginning we would be spending a lot of money on it. It would be an immediate alleviation of deductible payments for anybody who switched to American insurance, and over time, as the fund grows, it would become more and more cost effective to run. So it's the type of thing that if we invest in now, 10 years from now, it would be saving everybody a lot of money, and it would have a huge effect of growth on the whole economy. I don't think anybody can really overstate the negative economic effects of the American healthcare system. It's like the leading cause of bankruptcy, except for like business failings. I'll have to double check that. So the only problem with this solution is a problem that already exists in the current system. With the insurance system, you get hospitals overcharging, and they do that for a lot of complicated reasons that I don't fully understand and don't really want to explain right now. The solution to private hospitals overcharging insurance companies is price controls. This is something that Donald Trump has announced, but I don't think will ever be properly implemented under his administration. Price control on prescription and over-the-counter medications, stuff like bandages. Anything that a hospital uses that goes onto your bill should be priced fairly, and that is going to improve everybody's healthcare costs, not just people who are going into the American insurance plan. If you are a capitalist who doesn't like the idea of price controls. Fact of the matter is that we need these price controls now in order to rebalance the price of all of these items, because the price is just out of control. We need to control the price, at least for a time, so that we can fix the healthcare market. And after that, you know, if you want to get elected on anti-government regulation platform and remove those price controls, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I wouldn't vote for you. So the other problem is surge demand. If we get a bunch of new people covered by insurance that is comprehensive, then you're going to see a bunch of people going to hospitals, doctor's office, dentist's office, basically getting all of the care that they haven't gotten before. So there's going to be a massive surge in people going to healthcare providers. My solution to the problem of surge demand is that we should open medical schools using the Department of Education. So what this does is it opens up a new path for the Department of Education. It allows it to grow and be flexible, actually open up and build new buildings and teach a new curriculum. Will be good for the Department of Education when it comes time to reform that area of the government. But it also directly addresses the problem of a doctor and nurse shortage. The goal of all spending is to increase circulation, and what building projects do and education projects do is we're going to be paying builders to build the school, paying teachers, administration, and technicians, and that is going to have a major stimulus effect on the economy everywhere where we put one of these new medical schools. I already said it. It addresses the problem directly by training nurses to care for people. I think it's honestly a good problem to have. Again, it's a difficult thing that we have to do now so that 10 years from now, we'll have made the right investments into our future and our kids will be able to grow up in a better society. That's the point of all of this. That's the point of politics, to improve society for our children. If we never do anything hard because it's hard, then we're never going to do anything good. So when I'm actually in Congress writing this bill, I would obviously want to speak to experts and get their opinions on exactly how it should be implemented. For me, those three policies, a national insurance program, price controls on medical supplies, and opening schools using the Department of Education to train new nurses and doctors, they seem like a good start to me of addressing the so-called healthcare crisis. These solutions are going to create high-paying jobs in the private and public sector and boost growth all over the country. New hospitals will open with the knowledge that they can receive payment and employ doctors and nurses. So you're going to see growth beyond just people paying for healthcare. You're going to see actual new hospitals, new doctor's office, new dentists opening up and being pillars of their communities and serving their communities, and you're actually just going to see positive impacts. How should I talk about oil and labor gambit? Good Lord. Okay. I'm going to recommend that you watch my videos implementing the labor dollar, slavery, where is outer heaven? All of those videos are going to touch on this topic, which this topic is very simple, but it can be approached from so many angles that it kind of can feel complex. I'm going to try to explain it to you guys as simply and diligently as I can, and then I'm going to talk about what I think we should do about it. So the oil labor gambit recognizes two major problems. Oil is overvalued. The United States government wastes money propping up this dying industry because oil is the basis of the dollar's power, and labor is undervalued massively. At some point, the oil bubble will pop. China is whooping our ass in the renewables race, and I think that because of that, yen is going to be the global reserve currency because the dollar will become less and less stable as the oil price collapses. Meanwhile, you have people crying out for a wealth tax. Everybody wants a sensible, progressive, and effective tax. If you oppose taxes, you're going to be much more amenable to the tax on capital owners, which is just the cost of labor. Remember, from Marxism, capital owners only steal wealth from laborers. And personally, I believe that organizing labor is a public good that leads to the creation of new wealth. So I'm not a Marxist necessarily, but through that lens, you could see how the cost of labor is a wealth tax. I do think it is pretty hard to disagree that Jeff Bezos or like the Walton family don't exploit cheap labor to some degree. Right behind me is the stats on how many of Walmart's employees are on welfare. If I can find the stats for Amazon, they're going to be behind me as well. So the oil labor gambit is labor should replace oil as the primary commodity backing the dollar. You may remember, of course, that the dollar is a fiat currency, and this is true. Fiat currencies still need commodity markets in order to maintain stability. Constant trading creates lots of reference points for value. The dollar is actually backed by every single thing it's traded for. That's what being a fiat currency means. It's not that it's floating in a sea of trades that constantly reference the dollar, right? You guys understand that. The primary commodity is oil for reasons that I'm not going to get into right now. I have other videos talking about it, and you can watch Professor Jiang's game theory series. When you pay workers less, you get less circulation. I mean, obviously, depressing real wages over time has led to more people living paycheck to paycheck with less money to spend. So if they're spending less money, there's less circulation, which means you get inflation. People are spending less money, which means that the dollar is less valuable. That's how inflation works. For more information, just watch those videos I recommended, and also just use your brain. Think about what I'm telling you. Just think about it, okay? How do we actually do the oil labor gambit? Well, on the labor side of things, the first and most important thing to do is outlaw slavery in America. This means amending the 13th Amendment such that the minimum wage applies to the incarcerated population. We can apply tariffs to industries which are shown to use sweatshop labor. We can apply these with a clear rubric so that companies basically know exactly why they're being tariffed and how to stop the tariffs. For example, pay your employees more and you won't get tariffs. But the tariffs will create demand for those industries at home. And of course, the industries with the most sweatshop labor are going to be like textile manufacturing. And those are the same industries that we're always talking about. Where'd they go? Where'd they go? But we also know that they went to China to be done by sweatshop laborers. We could either bring those well-paying jobs back, or we can use bargaining power to make them pay their employees more. Remember, because the United States dollar is the world reserve currency, any person making more money is good for the value of labor in USD. We also want to take steps to reduce all sub-minimum wage labor in America. So that includes tipping jobs. It also includes migrant labor. So the second thing to do after dealing with sub-minimum wage labor and slavery, we need to raise the minimum wage and lock it to inflation. All we need to do for this is reevaluate the minimum wage each year. I'm going to say right here, in case you're wondering, I think the minimum wage should be between $23 and $25 an hour federally. If that seems high to you, I would ask you to think about whether or not you think that prices seem high to you. Because the issue is not that prices are too high. The issue is that wages are too low. That number might seem high, but it's not that high. The last thing to do on the labor side of this, the government needs to focus on the conditions for a high growth and low inflation economy. So this could mean directly creating jobs, like we talked about with the medical schools that I want to open through the Department of Education. It could just mean creating and enforcing fair rules for industry. It could mean getting rid of and reevaluating old arbitrary rules and regulations. I can tell you that copyright, IP, patent law need revisiting for the modern day, but also, seemingly innocuous regulations, like where you can park a food truck, could be revisited to create new opportunities for all kinds of people. Even subsidizing local businesses. Like I want to talk about in Richmond. Did you know that there's only one skate shop? There's only one skate shop in Richmond, and it's in Carytown. The next closest skate shop is a Zoomies in Short Pump. But just think of every single hobby or entertainment business that you can think of. They're struggling or just like straight up non-existent. So we subsidize those industries. You make a lot of new growth in small business economies, right? So then on the oil side of the oil labor gambit, first thing, we need to re-enter the renewables race. I think we should try to hit net zero emissions before any other nation. We used to do things that seemed impossible. I don't really care about the odds. I know that we could do this. This means funding research as well as doing research. We should create a renewable energy bureau. I think there's got to be some way that we could leverage our military power. In some ways, it is kind of simple, right? We just need to build dense renewable energy generation. I mentioned cloud seeding in my global warming video. Increasing rainfall in an area would require irrigation to make use of that rainfall. If we were going to do something like cloud seeding to deal with the, say, drought in the southwest of America, then we would need to make some kind of irrigation system in order to make use of it and actually make sure that we're alleviating the drought and not just flooding the area. So if we were going to build an integrated irrigation system anyway, we could also find a way to integrate like a new hydroelectric system that hasn't even been thought of because we're not even using cloud seeding on a massive scale yet. I don't know all the science here to say like exactly what's possible. That's why when I'm writing these bills, I'm going to be talking to experts. If I was executing this legislation, then I'd be working with experts. I'd be working with people who know how to do this and who have been coming up with big ideas, because there are big ideas out there. They just don't get enough attention because the government is too busy giving money to fossil fuel companies. The only way to deal with our oil dependency is by investing in renewable energy. If you look like globally, it's like trillions of dollars go to the fossil fuel industry to keep the market price of oil high. I think that we should be shifting these subsidies to the point of sale so that instead of paying them to the fossil fuel companies where the CEOs are taking home millions of dollars in salary a year, we provide the subsidy at the point of sale. So when you pump your gas, the gas station receives the subsidy rather than the oil company that supplied the gasoline to the station. Again, price controls here. We used to regulate the price of oil. Price of oil will fall over time. Either Chinese energy is going to be the commodity backing the yen, which is going to be the new world reserve currency, or United States labor will be the commodity backing the dollar, and we will maintain our financial advantage. Those are the two futures that I see. If you genuinely believe that oil will hold its value indefinitely, then you are honestly living a fantasy. New technology will replace the old technology for energy generation. But it's time to talk about lobbying. The way I see it, lobbying is like the ultimate rent-seeking behavior. So Aipacs spends this amount of money that's on screen behind me. So in this section about lobbying, I might use some images from opensecrets.com. I have numbers for lobbying spending as well as just basic campaign contributions. In this video, I'm kind of going to be treating that all as the same because I think personally, if you are a special interest group giving money to a politician, then you are lobbying them. It doesn't have to be like on a specific issue. I do want to make a separate video later on down the line about democracy and about what makes an effective government that represents the interests of the people. This section is again going to be talking mainly about the economics. So Israel lobbies us to give them money, and I already talked about in part 1 of this. We do need to make some sensible cuts to our defense budget. Moving forward, now that I have the data in front of me, looking at this $51 million number, that money is doing nothing except for purchasing the loyalty of our representatives. This spending goes to our representatives so that they represent Israel instead of us. And I just want to say here, you know what the fuck you could do with $51 million to help people? Not even just in aid to children who are being bombed in Gaza. Don't worry about that. We're not getting political in this video. But with $51 million, you could build at least 51 million houses. That's all I'm saying. Back to the video. Thank you guys for watching this far. Just to buy politicians. All they do when they buy the politicians is get them to agree to give them funding for a war that most Americans don't support. Not trying to get too political here. That's rent-seeking behavior. They spend money so that they can get our tax dollars. I mean, that's rent. They spend money so that we pay them rent. Lobbying is part of what I call the corruption trifecta, and I just came up with this. Lobbying or inequality in campaign spending, a politician having misaligned interests, and undemocracy, like compromised elections. Those three all feed into each other in ways that I'm not going to get into here because this video is about the economy. So I think it's safe to say we need a better way to make sure that lobbying activity matches its intended purpose. What is the intended purpose of lobbying? Lobbying is the way that individual businesses, industries, and foreign countries tell politicians how to serve their interests. This is valuable when politicians need to know things in order to make informed decisions. Unfortunately, the lobbies don't just wait until they're called upon to help make an informed decision. The lobbies are always there lobbying our politicians. This means that our politicians spend less time focusing on us and more time focusing on the interests of individual businesses, industries, and foreign countries. This is borne out as true when you think of what a member of Congress does. Do you feel as though they spend more energy focusing on what is good for you or on what is good for individual businesses, industries, and foreign countries? So how do we limit lobbying power? These are my suggestions. I think we put a hard cap on campaign spending applied to the donor. Takes account of spending across political action committees, direct donations, and nonprofits. So the cap applies directly to the donor. They pay however much money, and then they cannot donate any more money. Kind of seems anti-freedom. I think the thing that's kind of most crucial to America as a free country is free and fair democratic elections. If it's what we have to do to preserve that, I think it is okay to step on the personal freedom of somebody to spend as much money as they want on an election. Speaking of infringing on people's rights, here are some things I think that we should ban. I think lobbyists should be banned from fundraising for candidates. Former lawmakers should have a 10-year ban on joining lobbies. Like, period. 10-year ban. I'm serious. Lobbies should not be allowed to hire the spouses of politicians. I think that we should have a 24-month ban on lobbies donating to candidates after they vote on legislation for them. So this is like thank you money. Like for example, say that there's a bill going, are we going to give Israel $100 billion to bomb children? Of course, the AIPAC lobby meets with all the politicians. I heard Bernie Sanders say AIPAC will literally write up the recommendations for like changing a bill. Those recommendations will be submitted on the House floor, like word for word. So AIPAC will literally like write legislation, and then the congressman will pass that in Congress, and then AIPAC will just donate to their campaign immediately. So I think that should have like a 24-month ban. The most important thing is that our elections are fair. The most important thing is that we have democracy. Yeah, you know what? It's a problem that foreign governments are infiltrating our government. It is a problem. I don't think that they should be free to do that. The freedom to infiltrate the government is not like a God-given right. I mean, it's not. And that's it. I mean, they just should not be allowed to do certain things. They should fulfill their stated purpose, advising our politicians on industrial policy, not literally paying our politicians to agree with them. So those are just some ways to deal with the lobbying problem. I'm not an expert here. I'm not an expert on anything, actually. Definitely want to defer to experts when I'm writing these bills. We need to overturn the Citizens United ruling that allows for super PACs to accept an unlimited amount of money. Because again, that money is just wasted on advertisements to trick people. That money should go do something productive in the economy. All this shit is rent-seeking behavior, and all rent-seeking behavior does is cause inflation and make rich people richer. That's all it does. What we could do is award public funds for campaign spending, level the playing field. We also used to have something in America called the Fairness Doctrine, which is basically like radio and TV. If they were going to show one candidate, they'd have to show the same amount of runtime as the other candidate. Ronald Reagan got rid of it. I don't know though, because that honestly seems a little bit too anti-freedom to me. Like forcing a radio station to highlight a candidate that like maybe nobody at the station actually agrees with. It seems kind of anti-freedom, but at the same time, it did a good job at actually making our news media like fair and balanced. I don't know how you would apply it for the internet age. I want to hear y'all's thoughts on like the fairness doctrine and what a fairness doctrine would look like for a new internet age. So leave a comment if you know anything about that. I would love to hear from you. The housing crisis. Okay, guys, so in Richmond, there's this company. If you live there, you know. They've got these signs. The company is called Thalimer, Cushman, Wakefield. And they basically own like the whole city, okay? Them and a few other property management firms. What you'll see a bunch of dilapidated buildings, like run down, boarded up, and they all say for lease, Thalimer, Cushman, and Wakefield. So for me, it's like, how did these guys get to the point where they can own like most of the vacant property in Richmond City, yet they're all empty? How are these guys making money? You'd think empty units should be wasted money. Well, in the current system, empty units are not wasted money. What happens is investors buy the units, wait for the price to go up, usually from gentrification, and then they rent or sell the units out at an obscene price. They take the properties off the market, and then when the price goes up, they put it back on the market. And they don't do anything to maintain the buildings. Most small businesses' single largest expense is rent if you have premises. It just reduces the supply of real estate and drives the price of available real estate up. So it's literally rent-seeking behavior. It leads to inflation across the entire economy, but also specifically it leads to inflation in the housing market or the real estate market because there is less real estate on the market, which again only benefits the investors who are taking the real estate off the market. Okay, but it says for lease, it says for sale, but the buildings are usually so poorly maintained just because it doesn't make sense to waste money on the building when you're speculating on the price of it. Nobody moves in because the building is poorly maintained and the price is too high. These guys know what they're doing, okay? These guys know what they're doing, and they own, like I said, they own most of Richmond. There's probably a real estate developer in your city that owns most of the buildings in your city, or most of the vacant properties in your city. I'm serious. Like, when you're walking around your city, like, look at the for lease and look at the for sale signs and you'll see what I mean. I'm suggesting a land value tax. It would basically increase the cost of land speculation. You should watch Mr. Beat's video, and there's a guy named Britmonkey who also has a video about this. I think every city in America needs to implement a land value tax. I think it's an important part of the equation for balancing the price of real estate. It could also be good in some rural areas, but I do know that there are some rural families who just couldn't afford to pay it because land is priced differently out there. You'd only want to apply it in places where it made sense. Another thing to do with these speculative developers, having the city do just regular inspections and tell them, like, you have to fix these problems, just because they lower the curb appeal, and it's bad for residents to have dilapidated buildings that just don't ever get worked on and stay vacant forever. I mean, it's bad. And especially, like I said, I mean, small businesses' major expense is usually rent. If you want to have growth in the small business sector, then you need to have those properties become available. And a land value tax is a way to do that. When it comes to like local market abuse for the real estate market, that's something that local governments have to take into account and fight at a local level, okay? Like, I don't know the best way to deal with the housing crisis in each locality, but I've got some ideas for more like large scale things, but we still have to talk about how to stabilize like market prices and increase the housing supply. This could be as simple as just having subsidies for building, and I think also the government should run construction crews. Building is really good for the economy. What the government could do is build these units for the public good and sell for a profit while still undercutting the market. And when you undercut the market, that obviously has a deflationary effect. So it doesn't need to be a massive scale government building project, but just enough in the areas that need it to lower the market price enough to alleviate the housing crisis, while also, like, I mean, you know, there's the usual Ezra Klein abundance argument, which is like, we need to get rid of red tape, which I agree with as well. I think there's too much red tape around building housing. I love making shit up. We're gonna change the angle again. It's time to talk about unions, by which I mean workers' unions. You probably expected this to come up at some point. A union is necessary to make sure that employees are not being taken advantage of. We already discussed things like raising the minimum wage, but that's not all that a union is good for. Unions make sure that the workers at a company have representation for decisions about the company. It makes it harder for companies to make decisions like selling out. If you work in the restaurant industry, you know a union would make it harder for them to hire out just like a middle manager who tells you to do shit, who doesn't actually know what the fuck is going on. I mean, come on, guys. How often have you been at work and there's just at least one manager who just does not know what you do? Like, you cook the food, or I don't know what people do that don't work at restaurants. You do the work, and then there's like a manager who's like telling you some shit, but like they don't know what you do. That pisses me off. And the union is protection against that. Okay? Oh shit. We got to talk about the Taft Hartley Act. So there's a Wikipedia article on screen. It basically makes it so that the president can take a group of striking workers and declare them criminals unless they go back to work. It's only ever been invoked once. Can you guess which president invoked the Taft Hartley Act? It was Ronald Reagan. That's because Ronald Reagan's a bitch. And anyways, sorry. Excuse me. I shouldn't say bitch. He invoked it on the FAA, which is a government union. So that was basically his rationale for it. He said, like, I wouldn't support using the Taft Hartley Act for a union that's in the private sector. That's anti-freedom. But like, the president has the power to do that. And also, just because somebody works for the government, it doesn't make them different from somebody who works for the private sector. More Perfect Union, I believe, has a video about the time that Ronald Reagan invoked the Taft Hartley Act. But yeah, I think the Taft Hartley Act should be repealed because it's unconstitutional. I don't think that the government should be able to force you to work. And as we said already, in the current system with the 13th Amendment of the Constitution as it is, if the government can declare you a criminal for not working and then enslave you for being a criminal, then the government can just turn anybody they want into a slave, because it's either you work or you get enslaved. And that's like, for me, that doesn't really fly. I thought America was a free country. Well, anyways, moving on. There is other legislation in America that makes forming a union more difficult than it has to be. I think that we need legislation that makes union busting illegal, because if a bunch of people want to do something, then they shouldn't be stopped for no reason, because again, this is America. I also think that we need some way to encourage corporations to pass equity onto the employees instead of for the CEO. This actually used to be a lot more common, again, in the 1960s when taxes on investments were higher. Yeah, I mean, hard work entitles you to the fruits of your labor, whether you're a member of a union or not. That's why corporations should pass equity onto the workers. We can encourage this in a few different ways, like tax incentives. So it's not a secret that the internet has enabled a lot of rent-seeking behavior. There's even this whole new thing called techno-feudalism that you can read about. Basically, the platform and attention economy are mostly unregulated, lucrative for investors, and damaging to society. I have a couple ideas that I want to share for this. So here's my internet initiative as far as how to fix the economy goes. I think that we should develop a public option, an alternative for DoorDash, Uber, and point-of-sale systems. Like, I'm talking about Toast Takeout, which is almost a monopoly. Takeout anymore, it's Toast POS, because they were considered a monopoly. That doesn't matter. Food delivery, ride share, and point of sale systems. All this would do is just empower businesses to use the internet to expand their income, and it would compete with the existing market, which we can all agree has gotten pretty price gougy. I mean, have you seen the price of an Uber lately? Have you seen the price of a DoorDash lately? And most of that doesn't even get passed on to your driver. It just gets eaten up by DoorDash and by Uber. So I think having a publicly developed option would be so good for society. Like, the actual cost for developing it compared to the amount that it would stimulate the economy and make that money back in taxes is like insane. There should be a public option for point of sale, delivery, and rideshare. Also, this is a little bit separate from the economy, but it's also integrated, and I'll explain to you guys why. There needs to be a system of online identification, okay? It's a way to confirm your age, identity, and whether you are human, but it doesn't give your info to the websites that you need to confirm your identity with. So you can stay anonymous, right? But it's basically like linked to your regular government ID. You could access all your government services with it, just like that. What it could be is a way to prove that you are a human, okay, without having to pass a CAPTCHA. Or you can prove that you are an adult without telling it your exact age. Basically just prove anything that needs to be proven without giving away any unnecessary data to confirm that you are who you say you are. The main reason I see this as being really, really important for the government to do is the amount of bots online. I mean, there's this whole idea of dead internet theory. The fact of the matter is we do not issue government IDs to bots online. And so if you could get an online ID that could preserve your anonymity while also confirming that you are a real human, it would be as simple as adding a switch onto Twitter where you could literally turn the bots off. I think we're at the point of maturity as far as like the internet goes where we really do need a system of confirmation. That's my solution: internet ID. Government internet ID. You can filter bots out of your feed seamlessly. How awesome is that? This next one's going to get pretty far out there. So if you don't follow, just ignore what I'm saying, okay? Skip forward. So we need new internet protocols to break up monopolies. I don't know exactly how this is going to work technologically, but I've got some ideas, and I don't know. You can mention in the comments if you know more than me. I'm sure you probably do. So please leave a comment. The blockchain can authenticate a unique piece of information with an NFT, a non-fungible token. You could have a system where all info, images, videos, spreadsheets, tweets, anything you want, could be tokenized and self-hosted or hosted on a third-party server like we think of with YouTube, is run on Google servers. So when you upload a video, it's tokenized, right? And the token has the video's metadata, but it also has like the video, right? So then you could have any video streaming site call on that token, and as long as it had access to that server and it was like enabled, you could stream that video from any video streaming website. That would add a view to the metadata on that token. You could track views on a single video across multiple websites, as you could have these non-fungible tokens embedded into other non-fungible tokens. So if you wanted to, in like a YouTube video, have a real-time countdown that like stayed accurate after the video was uploaded, or just like be able to update data, you could update a token and it would update it in real time in the video that you had uploaded. So all that this would do, allowing for things like self-hosting and allowing multiple websites to access the same video and preserve the metadata, like the amount of views, the amount of likes, stuff like that. What it would do is force these platforms to compete on things like video recommendation and on user experience, as opposed to like the current system where your only option to watch YouTube videos is YouTube and they'll shove a bunch of ads down your throat. So yeah, that would just enable more websites, more video streaming websites than just YouTube, and it would enable, and I don't know. Look, guys, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't even know if I'm using non-fungible token correctly. So any software developers, please at me in the comments. I hope that you guys can understand my vision, and I think it'd be cool if we could one day make it possible. There does need to be, what I'm not wrong about is that there does need to be an initiative to build this kind of democratic internet protocol. If we ever want to establish a living metaverse or build a future where cryptocurrency is actually relevant, we need to do something. I think it is the government's role as the centralized governing body to make this future possible, rather than just letting Mark Zuckerberg take his crack at it, letting Apple take their crack at it, letting Amazon take their crack at it, and it's all just a way to give you ads and take your money. I think that the government should do a public version. It's not whatever. I mean, that's crazy. But I think it's important. It's important to do that because of the fact that YouTube is a monopoly, and because there's monopolies everywhere, all over the economy, that use the internet to farm rent from people. I also think, while we're on the subject of internet services, I think the government needs to set out to just completely overhaul all of the government services websites. I think they should be unified and accessible through a single portal. I'm not the first person to say that every government website that I've ever used really kind of sucks, but I think that we need to just have a plan to fix that. And I think the other stuff I've mentioned in this internet section could come as a companion to overhauling the government services online portal. To finish a conversation about insurance. We started when we were talking about the healthcare system, but in America, we require liability insurance for all drivers. I think that if there's already going to be a federal insurance bureau for the healthcare plan, I think that we should offer liability auto insurance. Part of the reason for this is that auto insurance is a better income stream than health insurance, because claims would come at a more stable rate, as opposed to how we talked about health insurance would see a massive amount of claims for the first few years to settle pent-up demand. Auto insurance liability claims don't have pent-up demand because everybody already has liability auto insurance. After the insurance bureau itself is a couple years old and that pent-up demand from providing health insurance is settled, I think it would be awesome to talk about more like comprehensive auto insurance, homeowners insurance, and every kind of thing like that, because insurance becomes more and more effective the more people are on the plan, right? So the more plans you can offer, the more effective you can make that insurance. That's just how insurance is made to work. So I think it would be cool to really expand that over time. But before we continue, I think a lot of people would be upset or concerned by me talking about the government generating revenue from services like health insurance and auto insurance. Shouldn't these just be free for the public good? And yeah, well, I think they should be accessible for the public good. Remember, everything has to be paid for somehow, be it with tax dollars or with payments or with both. I call my political ideology monetary socialism, and part of the ethos of that is that charging money for services is okay, and even a good thing in a lot of instances. Unlike, say, public transport, which gets faster, safer, and more effective when it is free, insurance funds that must remain solvent are going to be more effective with a monthly payment or payroll tax. So in the same vein of taking a financial service and offering a public option, I think that the federal government should operate a bank. This could be separate from the Federal Reserve, but a bank operated by the executive branch of the government could offer basic services like checking and savings accounts, a credit card, and loans. The bank would operate without the predatory practices that private banks resort to because it would operate for the public good. This means hard limits on interest and on lines of credit per account or service. Imagine if the federal government offered the best rate on debt consolidation loans. I mean, that would just be a public good, but also the government could generate revenue from the interest, and so the bank would remain solvent and we could reduce the tax burden on everybody because of that. I mean, you see where I'm coming from, right? Like what we talked about at the beginning of this video with the healthcare plan, the bank could own a sovereign wealth fund. The bank could own a sovereign wealth fund, and what that could do is fund Social Security and retirement for a lot of people. The bank could manage your retirement account for you within a sovereign wealth fund, which could, I mean, eventually, and with the right planning and implementation, it could replace our current Social Security system and save a lot of money on that. But I'm not making any promises. I'm just dreaming big right now. Cheap loans, that's another way to create growth alongside like subsidies and tax incentives. It would just be a way for the government to get money into the hands of people who are going to use it to create growth. I think that my banking and insurance initiatives that I've talked about would probably outcompete private banks and insurance companies because I think that private banks and insurance companies are a scam. These financial services are crucial to modern life, and operating them for a profit is, in my opinion, just irresponsible. But I'm not talking about nationalizing those services. I'm not talking about overstepping our bounds and actually destroying those industries. I'm just talking about competing with them and, offering a better product. If you are still watching, you are probably one of the best people. I really, really appreciate it. If this is the first video of mine that you've seen, I recommend checking out my other videos. They're actually pretty good. If you made it this far, I think you ought to like and subscribe. I think the next couple videos coming from me are not going to be politics related. I like to do politics in phases. After I got a Nazi in the comments of my video on slavery, I realized being solely a political channel might just be kind of toxic. I think people who are into politics online can be honestly really fucking stupid. I'm not talking about you though. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. You made it to the end of the video. That's it. Goodbye. Love you.